Okay, I'll tell Jade to do that.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Chad Sturritt. I'm the Associate Vice President of Facilities Management here at Western Michigan. My colleague, Anand Sankey, also with Facilities Management. So we're going to try to project our voices today. The microphones actually aren't for the audio here in the lecture hall. They're actually for the live stream events. So that's why we're going to be talking a little bit loud, but the intention really is to make sure that we're heard on the live stream. Here to talk about space utilization and facilities condition assessment, the results of some studies that we've done. Anand's going to end the presentation actually with some talk about the master plan process. So for those of you who don't know, we've started a master plan development process, and these two studies largely are inputs to that process. So, space, facilities condition assessment, space utilization, what are our most used facilities on campus, particularly teaching and research? What are our least used facilities on campus? And then facilities condition is how much investment do we have to make in these facilities to bring them up to today's standards? So with that, I'll turn it over to Anand.
Thanks, Chad. I also would like to welcome our online viewers. Nick, am I good at the back there? Good. We have about 20 minutes worth of presentation. And then what we thought we would do is we would open it up for questions, comments, and more of a conversation. So we should have enough time to field your questions and so forth. Overall, I'll go over what we've been doing for the last 12 to 18 months. Why did we initiate this assessment? What were the findings from the assessment? And what the university has decided to do with next steps. So we entered into partnership with Sightline. You might have heard that company, or you would have heard the word Guardian, interchangeable. We basically decided to engage Sightline to perform two parts to this assessment. Many universities around the country can do it independently. The first part is the space utilization. The second part is the facility condition. We decided to do both together. While the data that they will provide or have provided is independent, we're going to use two data sets to make decisions moving forward on campus. Overall, 92 buildings were included across the university, which included Battle Creek, all of main campus, and the Grand Rapids downtown area, roughly covering about 6 million square feet, which constitutes about 85% of campus. The buildings that were not included are the structures that were not included: the power plant, the parking structure, Vandercook, the Bernard Center, the Student Center, since it was still in construction. Dunbar was excluded because it was still in construction. And Acadia Flats, I think at that point in time, was a year old. Go ahead. Absolutely. So main campus included all of West Campus, Parkview Farm, and Oakland Drive. Airport Annex was also included on Kilgore Road. And funny thing is that the airport facility is now called the College of Engineering and Applied Sciences Annex. We refer to it as the Kilgore Road facility. So a little bit about the timeline. In May of 2022, we put a request for proposal out on the street. And through the bidding process and interviews, we hired Sightline, or decided to partner with them, and went into contract with them in September of 2022. Because this was never done before on campus, as far as I can tell, there was a lot of a learning process for us as to what needed to happen in order to create a structure so that the information and the process that Sightline needed was in place. So that's what we spent most of January and February. And while that was happening, we were also going around campus, sharing the need for this assessment. In March and April, Sightline came on campus. Not only did they visit most buildings, but they also did some on-site interviews. And what we wanted to do is we wanted to get what the students and faculty thought about their teaching environments. In other words, their classrooms. Once they gathered all that information, internally at Western, groups like facilities management, OIT, registrar's office had to validate the information that they collected so it was accurate. Once that was done, they took the information back and started to analyze it. And then in September of 2023 is when they issued their preliminary report. And now we're here in January and February doing the next phase, which is sharing the findings and the next steps with the campus community. So why did we decide to embark on the space utilization and facility condition assessment? You will see on this chart that the green bar indicates the square footage increase over time on campus. While we were increasing square footage on campus, you will notice the blue dotted line, which is the enrollment, was going down or decreasing. Some of you might remember that we peaked in 2003 with 29,000 students plus. We're currently at about 16,000 plus. It wasn't until recently that the university took some proactive measures to reduce square footage. Notably, some of you might remember Wellborn Printing Services was removed, Draper Complex, Burnham Complex, and what we call the Little Three, which is French Zimmerman Davis and Davis Dining. And that's why you see the slight dip towards the last part of the graph. The Burnett Center hasn't been brought down yet, so it does not count. But as we continue to update this graph, then we'll take into account those buildings. Unfortunately for us and many colleges and universities, and just to put it in perspective, if you look at college, enrollment will see an uptick till about 2026. And then you will see a decline taking place till 2040. With enrollment decline, revenue will decline. Now, while those two are going down, unfortunately for us, our need for facility spending is going up for several reasons. One is that we have aging facilities, which needs reinvestment. Some of you might have heard the word deferred maintenance. That means equipment and assets are coming due because of life expectancy, and we need to replace them. That's what we call deferred maintenance that we do on campus. The second is the cost of materials and labor is continuously going up. So it's costing us more to replace and maintain. And third is the price of energy to cool, heat, and light campus. While that cost is going up and the need for spending is going up, the allocation to run campus is decreasing, which is the actual facility spending. And that's because it's related to enrollment and revenue. So when you combine all of this, it's quite troubling, literally. And so the university leadership decided that this path that we are on is not sustainable, and therefore the assessment is just one initial step towards a course correction. Now, before I go into the findings for teaching spaces, I need to spend a few minutes and share with you that when it came to space utilization, we broke it up into three categories. We have teaching spaces, which are the classrooms and the classroom labs. Basically, all those spaces that have course credits tied to it. The second category is research. Within research, there are two categories: externally funded research and internally funded research. At this point in time, we do not have any data for that second category because we're just meeting with individuals on campus to try to define how we want to capture that. But it will be something that we will capture, and we will share those findings in the coming months. And the third category is when you exclude classrooms and research, you are left with places like offices, meeting rooms, conference rooms, study rooms, storage rooms, and so forth. In the third category, what we did not focus on, or overall categories, is places like lobbies, hallways, bathrooms, elevators, mechanical, custodial closets, IT, and so forth. because those are considered fixed to the building and they can't change. They're just part of what the infrastructure of the building needs to meet codes and so forth. For today's conversation and discussion, I'm just going to focus on teaching spaces, which is classrooms and classroom labs. The findings is that we have 387 teaching spaces that are in the registrar's database, which is called 25 Live. That's their scheduling software. There is an additional 157 teaching spaces that are managed by the colleges, individual colleges. So there's a total of 554 teaching spaces across campus, which includes Battle Creek, Grand Rapids, and all of Kalamazoo. For the purposes of what I'm about to share you in the next slide, it only looks at the 387 spaces that's in the registrar's database, because that's the only database where we could extract information. So there's a lot on the slide, and I'll walk you through it. The first thing you look at is the blue line. I will share with you what the blue line means, but I'm going to walk you through this. So take, for example, all the buildings at the bottom are what are teaching spaces on campus. So let's pick CHHS, for example. The dark brown is room utilization. Room utilization is calculated based on how often a classroom is scheduled in 1 hour increments from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. Position utilization is how many seats are available in a classroom and how many seats are actually occupied by students. So for example, if this classroom has 150 seats and there's only 75 students in here, that's a 50% position utilization. The blue line, it's not an industry standard. It's what Sightline has recommended for us, and the reason they recommend it is because their clientele is somewhere in the range of 450 colleges and universities across the nation. And they have come to a general consensus that it's palatable to most colleges and universities that we reach 70% goal with position and room utilization. That's what we should strive for, the blue line. Now I'm going to give you some averages. When you take all of this and you combine it, this is only focusing on full semesters, which is fall and spring, or 4 semesters. The data came from 4 semesters, full semesters. If you take Monday through Thursday, across campus, we are at 37% room utilization. After 5 o'clock, we consistently drop to 20% room utilization. Anyone want to guess what happens on a Friday, what the percentage is? I mean, you don't get a prize if you get it right, though. It's about 8 to 9%. For summer 1 and summer 2 is excluded from this. Summer 1 and summer 2, we're at about 15% consistently. The other interesting observation that Sightline made is that 51% of our classes have less than 20 students, but only 12% of our rooms have capacity that less than 20. And 22% of our classes have more than 30 students, but 57% of our rooms have seats greater than 30. What that's telling us is that our classroom enrollment has become misaligned with available classroom seats. We have too many big classes today than what we need. Now, there could be several reasons why this is happening. One is that enrollment has dropped for the last few decades, smaller classrooms. The second is that we have changed the way we teach. Hybrid, high flex, virtual, in-person, and so forth. And the third, I think, is possibly COVID. COVID has driven us to go online as well. And I'm sure there are several other reasons why this is happening as well. But it's an interesting observation. Density factor across higher education. So if you look at the blue star, that's a 4-year comprehensive university such as ours. If we compare ourselves with our peers, we should be somewhere in the range, population-wise, on campus, which includes students, faculty, staff, and so forth. We should be in the range of about 400 people per 100,000 square feet. Western currently is at about 200 people per 100,000 square feet. We're less dense than where we need to be compared to our peers. Now, why is that a good thing? Possibly. We have more elbow room. We feel like we have more room on campus. But the flip side to that is that's a lot more square footage that needs to be maintained. As I mentioned a little bit earlier, that while they were on campus, we conducted 2 focus groups interviews with students and faculty. And here are some of the comments or common themes that came out of those interviews. I noticed the similarities in what students felt and faculty felt. So that was the space utilization portion. I would call it part 1 of 3 because we only completed the teaching spaces. We're now moving on to the facility condition analysis portion of it. What our spending and reinvestment into campus has been for the last 5 years. And this could be the deferred maintenance dollars, it could be the state funding, it could be one-time gifts, it could be whatever the dollar value is that we get in order to reinvest into our assets. I want to bring your attention to 2 colors here, the dark blue and the dark red. The dark blue is HVAC, which is heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. And what that means is that's usually the biggest category because it includes the chillers, the heating, the cooling, the piping, the pumps, the air handlers, the controls, and so forth that keeps the building functioning for temperature and so forth. The cost for replacement in that category, just to give you a couple of examples, like I mentioned there with elevators. Elevators currently are running about $300,000 to $400,000 per elevator, and they need to be replaced every 25 years. A chiller that cools a building has a life expectancy of 25 to 30 years. It'll cost anywhere from $1 to $1.5 million to replace. We have strategically invested in those areas because those are critical components. The other area is space renewal, which is the dark red, the carpet, the paint, the light fixtures, and furniture. We've been very purposeful in how we invest in that area, and that has been related to teaching spaces and classrooms. That's where our focus has been, upgrading classrooms. While doing that, we look at the pathway towards the classrooms, the hallways, the bathrooms, and so forth. So that's where our 2 areas of primary reinvestment has been. This is a 10-year need by time frame across general fund, student affairs, and athletics. You will notice that HVAC has the largest need because it has the largest amount of components inside a building. What I'm showing you here is everything in black is past due. It's past its life expectancy. In 3 years, everything that's in red will move into the black category. And subsequently, it'll keep adding on. You will notice from the previous slide that the amount we reinvest and the amount we need here, there's such a disparity. Now, if you break it down to the 3 categories, which is general fund, student affairs, and athletics, currently general fund has a backlog of $258 million. or what's past due. In 3 years, you can add $45.3 million to it. So this current backlog is not something we can actually catch up with based on our funding allocation currently. On the student affairs side, they are sitting at about $100 million. Now, this does not include the Valley 3 announcement where Valley 3 will be replaced with a new building. When we run the numbers next year, that backlog will actually drop because Valley 3 had a backlog of infrastructure needs and asset replacement needs. But because it's being taken offline, then the backlog goes away. So Student Affairs has made some proactive measures by removing Draper Complex, Burnham Complex, and the Little 3, and that has reduced their backlog. Most of their needs in the valleys, Valley 1, 2, and 3. They have Spindler Hall and Stadium Drive apartments, but not as much. Athletics, their backlog is $28.5 million. For the most part, their focus of backlog is at Lawson Arena, excluding some turfs that need to be replaced and some digital scoreboards. A big chunk of what their backlog is at Lawson Arena. Lawson Arena has not seen a major upgrade or renovation since the building was built. Excluding the ice making machine about 8 years ago, we had to put a new ice making machine in there because the mechanical room flooded with 8 foot of water. So, with all of this information before us, the senior leadership at Western decided to move forward with some task force or committees. And there were 2 committees that they decided to form. Both those committees will complement the 3rd committee, which is the campus master planning, which was on a separate path but parallel in a sense. The first one is to optimize how we can increase the classroom utilization on campus. As I mentioned earlier, we are currently sitting at 37%. We need to get it up. This task force is being chaired by Chris Cheatham and Sarah Registrar's Office, OIT, and a series of colleges across campus. So it's well represented. They are to look at all teaching spaces and decide if all teaching spaces need to be combined into a central database for scheduling. They are also to look at who decides to schedule classrooms. Is it a centrally controlled registrars or is it decentralized? They are to look at teaching spaces and align capacity of classrooms with number of enrollment. Look at the technology in the classrooms, especially with high flex. Look at the condition of the classrooms, the safety and geographical location. And finally, as I shared with you, our Fridays in summer 1 and summer 2 are not looking too good with the percentages, so they are to look at that and decide what we need to do with that. They've been asked to provide a recommendation by spring of 2024. Task Force B is space optimization for strategic investment. What that means is they are looking at a building level. They are to provide guidelines on what constitutes for us to decommission a building, hibernate a building, or raise a building. I'll just give you the 3 definitions. Hibernate a building means what we did with Henry Hall. We put it to sleep because there was a potential that we might need it in the future. And that is exactly what we're doing now. We're bringing it back online because we're taking Valley 3 offline, so we need the beds for the incoming students. Vandercook Hall is a decommissioned building. There is no utilities going to it, but we did not have the funds to raise the building, so we basically decommissioned the building with no intent of bringing it back online. And the Burnett Center is what you would say, we took it offline and we're raising it soon this summer, I believe. So that's the 3 different definitions of that. The second part of Task Force B is every year we need to issue a state capital outlay plan on what we want for renovations and new construction, and they've been tasked to put a list together. They've also been asked to provide 1 or 2 buildings that we could decommission or hibernate. And finally, provide a recommendation for a modest renovation on a general fund building. And they have a timeline to provide that recommendation to the Space Advisory Committee, which is pretty much a good part of the cabinet that represents in the Space Advisory Committee. And finally, Task Force C, which is taking a parallel path, which is the campus master planning. They are to look at the university's strategic goals and align themselves with what the campus is going to look like based on those values and missions and core values. And also to identify what campus might look like in the future in the physical structure of campus. They also have a timeline, and their timeline is to complete their work and submit to the Board of Trustees by December of 2024. I think what we'll do now is probably open it up for some questions, comments, conversation. And I just, like Chad said earlier, if you have a question, just wait for one of them to bring your microphone to you so that the people online can hear the question. Chad?
Hello, I'm an electrician in maintenance, and Anand spoke about the classroom scheduling. It's through the 25 Live, I believe is what it's referred to. There's been several occasions where we've looked on that website and it shows there's nothing scheduled in there, so we go there to perform maintenance and the classroom's full. So I don't know who's responsible for internet information, but everything should be in there, which would affect your numbers. Secondly, when it is in there, we try to schedule around so we can perform things when no one doesn't interrupt anybody. And typically Friday we do all the classroom work, but just my thoughts. Thank you.
So I will share with you that I will take your concerns about maintenance has access to 25 Lives so that we can schedule work based on the occupancy of the classroom so that we don't show up to replace light bulbs or to fix furniture or anything like that when there's a class going on. So we try to figure out where the gaps are. So his comment and observation is it's not always accurate. And so I will take that information with me and share that with the registrar's office as well as Task Force A, because I think you're indicating that if there is a class going on and the schedule says it's vacant, that we might not be capturing the information accurately.
Correct.
The second part to your
Fridays.
yeah. Fridays is a good time to do it, and that I think is pretty evident from the percentages that we're seeing.
Hi, my name is, can you hear me? My name is Laura Moss. I'm with Landscape Services. I just have a question about, and I know that institutions move slowly, but it seems to me like with online teaching and learning that this trend is not anything new. It's pre-COVID, and yet all this housing keeps cropping up and this new student center at an astronomical cost. It seems to me that maybe there's some disproportionate funding and that if the trend is that enrollment is going down and online learning is becoming more of a thing, shouldn't somebody have been pumping the brakes sooner?
Hi. For those that you don't know, I'm David Dakin, Director of Campus Planning, or at least that's one of my hats. That's a good question, because I think as we've done projects, and we've even when we did the master plan in 2000, there was discussion about online, or I think that time it was called distance learning. So you knew it was out there. Nobody knew exactly how fast it would come on, and certainly didn't know about the pandemic, which kind of brought it on a little faster. So that is a consideration. I will say, though, that the university, there's more to the university than classes, and that is something that we talk about a lot, and we'll talk a lot about in the master planning is that experience, that college experience, and the student center is a good example of that desire. We heard that again and again from students, faculty, and staff, what that student center should look like to give that campus experience. And I think that's a theme you'll hear as well. So it's a balancing act between how prevalent online or hybrid learning versus that campus experience.
On the heels of the Valley Dining Center not being able to completely open because they can't get enough employees, and the menu going down to, 40%, 50%. I ate there a few weeks ago, and I opened there. I was in dining at that time when they opened, and it is so ordinary and subpar that from what it was when it opened. I guess I don't understand. It's like, how much is too much? I get that there are amenities that students appreciate, their families appreciate knowing that they have access to, and when you have deferred maintenance and hibernated buildings and such, it just seems like there needs to be a different way to fund things, maybe based on percentage or something other than enrollment, that makes sure that, yeah, the kids are getting pizza whenever they want it, but is the water in the burners full of lead, or, there's got to be a balance.
Yeah, and for those online, I don't know if you caught all that, but basically the concern is our priorities, sort of where funding goes, and you're right, and it's a balance, because we live in a slightly different reality than 20 years ago, 10 years. And again, it's going to be interesting with the master planning process, because how do we prepare for the next 5 or 10 years? Because we don't know, really, there could be something we're not even thinking of on that point. So you're right, it's a balance, and one of the best ways I think we can, so we can best, as humanly possible, create solutions that frame going forward as best as possible. I mean, you do as best you can and deal with, again, who knew a pandemic was coming?
And I'll just add to what Dave's saying too. As Anand presented, the population demographics going down. There's a limited set of students, and that student population is going down, or the potential student population. We're competing with these other universities around the state for those students. And the only way that we can do it is to have the top facilities and things that will attract those students to want to be here at the university. So we have to reinvest in these facilities, and we have to reinvest in housing so that we're meeting modern needs of what the students' needs are today. So if we don't invest, we're not going to attract those students.
Is that to get bodies in the door, or is that to offer the best academics? I mean, when I send my kids to college, it's because I want them to get the best academics. I don't care about football. I don't care about the dining hall. And a warm body on the rolls is a pretty cold way to look at it, and that it feels like you're offering, like, here's a plate of this. Do you want this? Will this get you to sign up? And at what cost? It seems like the focus has gotten really wide on amenities. And I know the academics are fabulous. I graduated from here myself. I've 2 kids graduated from here. And it just seems like there's a lot of money being spent that's not a proven way to increase enrollment. And I don't, I'm no specialist.
Yeah, I think one of the things Dave mentioned was balance. I think what we want to offer is top-notch academics, but also the best college experience. I think that's how we're trying to attract the best students. So it's that balance of all things to offer that experience.
I know it's a lot of information that I put in front of you today. It's a lot to absorb. The intent is not for you to leave here feeling down or depressed. The intent is to share with you that the university has moved forward with an initiative to get data so that we can move forward with some planning and some decision-making processes. I'll share with you, in the last 1 year, I had the opportunity to travel a little bit to share what we are trying to do. And in my conversations with people, peer groups, colleges and universities, they complimented us that we figured out how to get the funding and the initiative and the buy-in to do an assessment like this. Many universities and colleges are facing the same thing we're facing, but they haven't even got the assessment done, let alone that we're going to the next phase of trying to figure out how to correct it. So I know it feels like this is not a good situation, but I'm telling you that we now have information that we can move forward and make some course corrections. So that's why I'm optimistic, probably more than looking at some of you now. And it's really on purpose that we started this assessment knowing that the campus master plan was about to get off too. Because like David said and Chad said, that the information we have here will, while independent in this decision-making process somewhat, will feed into the master plan.
Are there any other questions?
About, I know there's many factors in the master plan about what's going to be decommissioned or raised or put to sleep for a while. And I'm wondering with Dunbar as an example, is it true that in general it's easier to get funding for buildings that are mostly classrooms and not mostly office spaces? I just don't know how that works in general. Or
As in, Dunbar is a state-supported renovation project where the state did provide funds for that. This building was one of those. And yes, the state has about 7 criteria that they use to decide whether a project will get funded or not. And classrooms are right at the top, along with economic impact and those sorts of things. They have not typically funded it like a general office building, and they will not fund what they consider revenue producing facilities like the student center or the resident halls. Those they just will not fund. So that's a good question.
If there are no other questions, thank you all for coming today. Thank you for those online. Thank you, Anand, for that very thorough presentation. And yeah, everybody have a great weekend.